Okay.
Bueno, este río tiene una importancia ancestral, espiritual, porque
This river has ancestral and spiritual importance to the Lenca people because it's inhabited by the female spirits. These female spirits guard the rivers.
custodian los ríos.
The Gualcarque River is also used for growing food and gathering medicinal plants. And of course, it's vital to the entire population downstream. I believe it signifies life.
After a military coup in 2009, the Honduran government awarded concessions for 47 dams to power hundreds of new mining projects. Chinese engineering giant Sinohydro joined with the Honduran company to build a dam near Rio Blanco. The Acozarca Dam would impact hundreds of Lenca people.
This was a violation of indigenous rights from the start, because the National Congress granted a concession without providing free, prior, and informed consent.
No es un crimen defender.
Aquí donde estoy sentado aquí era una gran frijolera cuando entró.
We had beans planted right where I'm standing, but when the company came in, they ran their tractors over the fields, destroying everything.
Por eso nos encaprichamos y estamos organizados.
We got mad. Then we decided to organize ourselves with Copine.
Copine, an indigenous rights organization, co-founded by Berta, organized the Lenca people around their internationally recognized rights.
En 2 cabildos abiertos y en más de 150 asambleas indígenas.
In more than 150 indigenous assemblies, our community decided that it did not want that hydroelectric dam.
Berta filed complaints with Honduran government and organized peaceful protests in the nation's capital. As her visibility increased, she became a target for the government.
We denounced this dam and were threatened with smear campaigns, imprisonment, and murder. But nobody heard our voices until we set up a roadblock to take back control of our territory.
For well over a year, the Lenca maintained the roadblock, withstanding harassment and violent attacks. Tragically, Rio Blanco community leader Tomas Garcia was shot by the Honduran military at a peaceful protest.
Seeing this man murdered, the community became indignant, forcing a confrontation. The company was told that they had to get out.
Somos como 500 personas que tenemos ahí arriba. Por eso defendamos aquí Río Blanco, porque de aquí no pasarán.
Así se fue Sinohydro de Río Blanco.
And that is how Sinohydro left Rio Blanco. But it cost us in blood.
Sinohydro terminated its contract, citing ongoing community resistance. The World Bank later withdrew its funding over concerns about human rights violations.
Que podrían agredirla, que pueden matarla incluso, como han querido hacerlo.
They can attack her. They can even kill her, as they have tried. But her life transcends this moment in time. This struggle is a symbol of community resistance that inspires people across Honduras and around the world.
No podemos ser ingenuos ante ese poder. Cuando iniciamos la lucha de Río Blanco,
when we started the fight for Rio Blanco, I would go into the river and I could feel what the river was telling me. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I also knew we were going to triumph, because the river told me so.
For outstanding environmental achievement in South and Central America, the 2015 Goldman Environmental Prize is awarded to Berta Cáceres, Rio Blanco, Honduras.
Berta Cáceres presente. So I think what it tells us is that we are very vulnerable in Latin America and in other countries doing environmentalism. I was talking before with Andrew Kimbrell, who is here already, and we've been talking about in the past people who oppose capitalism were called communists, socialists, anarchists. Now people who oppose capitalism are environmentalists. So that is the sad reality, you know, that we are trying to defend the world and we become terrorists for the machine. So, and also I want to invite Rosie Burros. She has a message about what's going on now in Chico University. It's something very interesting that is starting, and she's going to tell for a few minutes. And then we have a short video about the bandana Shiva that somebody made, and then we're going to have Andrew Kimbrell, who is waiting here. Okay.
Thank you, Miguel. Without taking too much time from this very long day of a robust, full of information program, I'm excited to share with you an initiative that's been launched at California State University, Chico. It's a project that is titled Center for Regenerative Agriculture. And this center will operate under the purview of the Institute for Sustainable Development, with the goal of maintaining independent operational directive of focusing of interdisciplinary research centered around regenerative agriculture and sustainable food systems. We're just a few months away. Everything has passed through every college so that it's a collaborative effort, interdisciplinary, throughout the university campus. Today we've heard a lot about our climate and the causes and the solutions. So as we've summarized today in most all of the workshops, we've overshot our planet's capacity for sustainability. We have an option that can rapidly regenerate that which underlies our life here on planet Earth, and it's our soils. Our family, Burroughs Family Farms, are regenerative farmers here in California, and the two biggest threats to our civilization are soil loss, degradation, and climate change. The solution today, we heard, is available and affordable, and it's sequestering carbon in our soils. I wanted to share just a few things about the Center for Regenerative Agriculture. Not only through the educational department of providing a full spectrum educational opportunity at the university from production to the shelf, it will also create multidisciplinary degree programs in sustainability and regenerative agriculture. It will support studies abroad, learning experiences, and student internships. And it'll create the interdisciplinary research team for applied research in regenerative agriculture. I have like 10 pages of the description of this project, and I'm only going to give you 3 little sentences about it. Our vision is a world that generates an alignment of global societies that live to rebuild degraded ecosystems, increases nature's carrying capacities, and enhances the well-being for future generations. Thank you. Our mission, the Center for Regenerative Agriculture, aims to investigate, develop, demonstrate, and educate about comprehensive regenerative practices that both restore and enhance the resiliency of living systems. Through the research, practices, food choices, and policy, we strive to reimburse farmers and ranchers to begin to build soil carbon And the center will be a site for policy think tank to usher in real potential for the future of this planet's capacity to robustly sustain Earth's complex systems of diversity, and is humanity's most important imperative to make perhaps the most important contribution in human history. Thank you. We have a booth out front, and if anyone is interested in being on our email list, please leave your cards. And if you're interested in any more about the project, please contact me and I'll give you information. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful program, and it's great to be surrounded with energy that knows what the answers are for the future of our planet. Thank you.
So it seems like Camila didn't bring the video actually, so we won't be able to show it, sorry. But I want to remind you that our sponsors for this conference were Dr. Bronner's. We have David Bronner today. Tomorrow he has to go back. He's there. Also John Rulak from Nutiva. We have also Good Earth. I don't know, Mark Squire is around here. He has been super supportive. Center for Food Safety, that is represented by Diana Donlon. She's part of the steering committee, along with Leah Atwood from Mesa. I don't know if Leah is around here. Osprey Oriel Lake, Dana Pearls. We also have Cienega Capital as sponsor, Paisines Ranch. Sally is here, Sally? Is around here, maybe, Sally? And she's located in Hollister, and she has a huge farm and doing a lot of regenerative agriculture. It's very interesting, her project. We also have Catalan Farms. Maria Catalan, who was outside on a table, she was the first certified organic immigrant, you know, so immigrant farmer. Also, we have Radio Bilingüe. We had several programs in Radio Bilingüe, 1 hour long in Spanish, that were repeated in 54 stations in the US. So this conference is not just a gathering, but it's a campaign. We have been working for months educating people in Spanish in different commercial stations and also community radio in California and other states. And also we have Level GMOs. Maybe Pam Larry's around here, you know, she was the initial instigator of the Proposition 37. So there is a lot of people we have been working with for many years. And tomorrow we're going to have also people who are going to be speaking about land grabbing. For that we have here Mario Luna. I don't know if he's around here, Mario Luna. He's a Yaqui leader from Sonora. He's a former political prisoner. She was defending the right to the river, the Yaqui River in Sonora, against the government. And he's going to be speaking tomorrow at 9 a.m. along with Luis Magaña, who is an historical leader in Stockton. And also we have tomorrow Elizabeth Fraser from Oakland Institute. We will have a plenary called Keep It in the Ground, and we have people from Rainforest Action Network, Amazon Watch, Center for Biological Diversity. Then we will have also in the afternoon 2 very amazing presentations. One of them is going to be with Isis Alcines, who manages the largest urban farm in La Habana. She's here, and is coming with Mesa. Isis, I have the opportunity to interview her and her father after the Eco Farm this year, and I learned a lot of things that I didn't know about Cuba. And we're going to have also a plenary recognizing Rise of Nature with Osprey Oriel Lake, and it's going to be really good also. So I really want to invite Andrew Kimbrell. He's a friend. We have been working for a long time. 2 years ago, there was a debate between him and the vice president of Monsanto. And the vice president of Monsanto was showing, to support his facts, was showing National Geographic, you know. And Andrew Kimbrell was just, I don't know, this guy didn't have anything to do with Andrew Kimbrell, who's an amazing attorney. He's also a psychologist. He's an amazing intellectual. He's not just an activist. He's an intellectual. He's an attorney. He's a friend. He's one of our personal heroes. And he has been working over 30 years against the U.S. government and all these laws that are violating our rights. And he actually lately has been working against the Dark Act. He is one of the leaders behind all this fight against GMOs in the US. So, Andre, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel. I do not know a more passionate, more devoted, and just a better comrade than Miguel. Thank you for all these years and all this friendship, Miguel. I have a problem with podiums. I don't know. I should probably seek therapy for some. I just don't like to stand behind these things. Since we don't have Vandana Shiva, apparently, I thought I might start by telling you my favorite Vandana Shiva story. And it's when I first met Vandana. We've worked together for 30 years, actually. And one of the first times I met her was one of the very first conferences on climate change. It was in Washington, D.C., World Wildlife. A couple of people had put it together. It was international sort of organized, and there was a lot of people from around the world. And at the last minute, C-SPAN, which had just sort of kind of started then, decided to televise it. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the difference at a conference when it's not being televised and suddenly gets televised. Everyone suddenly gets very, very intense and very rhetorical. And so this conference went on for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and people kept talking about the developed world and the undeveloped world, the developed world and the undeveloped world. And so finally, Vandana got up and she said, since this is the beginning of a two-day conference, let's just get something straight. She said, indigenous peoples have lived for millennia after millennia on this world in a relatively sustainable way. And you here in the West, in 150 years, have compromised the entire biochemistry of the planet. So she said, so for the rest of this conference, let's call my indigenous people the developed people and call you the undeveloped people. So I knew we were going to be fast friends forever, and we fought against the patenting life and many other stuff, many other wonderful issues we fought over the years. What most people that know me at all know me as an attorney and as a bioethicist, as a writer, but I too have spent a few years of my life trying to add nitrogen to soil. Let me explain that quickly. Which is that I spent about 4 summers and a half a winter working on a dairy farm in Hudson, New York. 36 cows, Swiss-German farmer. I learned a huge amount working on that farm. I thought at the time I might want to become a farmer. And so I worked on the farm, and one of my jobs, since I was kind of low man on the totem pole, one of my jobs was to, after the paddle system got all the manure into the manure cart, it was attached to a John Deere tractor beneath the barn, was to move that up and, of course, to go to the back 40 and to spread it as manure. And one rainy night, after the evening milking, I was trying to get the John Deere tractor up the incline from the barn with a big load of manure behind me. And I kind of just put too much on the gas, kind of jerked up the hill. And those old John Deere tractors, I don't know how many people had them, they had a double brake. And you had to put it on both. I slipped to the left, and the entire tractor then went right into the milk house, the front of the tractor, of the dairy farm. Boom! Right in the milk house. And fortunately, it missed the tank by just about a foot. And Henry, who was just finished milking at the time, said all the cows jumped up about 2 feet when I hit the milk house. And he said he continued to get more milk for about another hour after that. And then he said for the next 2 days he got almost nothing. So I think this is the first instance probably of post-traumatic stress disorder for the bovines in history. After many other incidences like that, he came to me one time and he said, I don't think you're cut out to be a farmer. Maybe you can do something else that would help farmers? And so began my life as an attorney working on behalf of farmers. Yeah. So, and years later, I litigated a product called bovine growth hormone. People know what bovine growth hormone is, Monsanto's flagship product. real good public relations on their part. Hey, let's start biotechnology with hormones we're adding to milk. Kind of stupid. But we litigated against that, and after a couple initial victories we lost, and bovine growth hormone began to be sold in America. And because I'd worked on a dairy farm, and I'd read what bovine growth hormone did to those dairy cows, including laminitis, which is dreadful and causes death as the hoof separates from the cow, and mastitis, just about every other horrible thing, I was very depressed. And I called my brother, Mark, and I was talking to him, and he said, Andy, he said, it sounded like you wanted to be successful in this lawsuit. And I said, well, of course I did. My God, yes, I know what it was going to mean to thousands and thousands of cows. He said, remember, in your work, you're not required to be successful. You're required to be faithful. And, you know, we've just come from a pretty tough defeat in the Dark Act in Congress. And I've been thinking about Mark's words because all of us, in all the work we do, we're required to be faithful to what we know and to what we believe. And I think one of the reasons I've been able to do this work for 30 years, and I recommend it to all the younger folks here, is because be at peace when you've been faithful. It's not about victory, it's about acting in a way that merits victory. And you don't know the long term. You have no idea. I did not know at that time when bovine growth hormone that we would begin a labeling campaign. I did not know that it would not get approval in Canada through some of the work we did. And I did not know through lawsuits and an amazing work by people like Rick North and others that we would be able to force that labeling, defeat them in court, including the Fifth Circuit, and force Monsanto to sell that product, that flagship product. So it's important to, you know, be faithful. Don't worry. You know, time will take care of the rest. And of course, even as we defeat the Dark Act, I think it's really important, just to say on GMOs just for a second, to remember that we have defeated over the last many years, all of us, though they're working in the GMO movement, we defeated genetically engineered tomatoes. You remember the flavor saver tomato? Yeah, there was no flavor to savor. The BT potatoes, we could convince McDonald's not to go for them, and that was the end of that. We defeated genetically engineered wheat. Imagine if all the wheat out there was genetically engineered to resist Roundup. Genetically engineered rice. And then biopharmaceuticals. They were going to genetically engineer all our crops to create, you know, to be able to produce pig vaccines. We defeated that. At that point, Monsanto had to fire 10% of its national and international team. You know. So if you, and of course, we mentioned the bovine growth hormone, and I promise you that we will defeat the genetically engineered salmon. We're in litigation right now. And I promise you that we will file a lawsuit against the Dark Act. We believe the Dark Act is grossly unconstitutional. It tells 100 million Americans that they don't have the right to know what's in their food. And we think that 14th Amendment claim will win the day for us. So I think another thing, and David Bronner and others here who've done such amazing work in this, Pam Larry I know is here as well, and many others, we've also built an incredibly strong and vibrant food movement over the last years, all of us. And this is what this is, you know. One of the most exciting things in my life and working in this issue for so many years, except just working in this incredibly empowering issue of food, which we can all do something about every day, versus some of the other issues that are more intractable in our society. One of the most exciting things about it is, I think, this sort of ability that we've had to take a foodie movement, you know, sort of, and I love those cooking channels, don't get me wrong. I'm a fanatic cook, so I love those things. And Gwyneth Paltrow, God bless her. No problem there. Loved her in the Shakespeare movie. But that was a foodie movement. And what we have done is we've created a food movement. A truly strong, political, viable movement that is passing laws in counties and states around the country. Laws that are saying no to neonicotinoid pesticides that are killing bees, saying no to GMOs. Right? All across the country say no to a number of different pesticides in counties. I don't know if anybody's here from Jackson County, Oregon. Yeah, that was the first county ever where they actually had GMOs planted, and the county ban survived. As a matter of fact, we went to court with them and we won. Yeah. So it says that counties across the country, states across the country, this is a viable political movement. Now, having said that, I think much of our movement is still based around labeling and around organic, which is great. But where do most people actually in America come in contact with their food? Grocery store. Grocery store and? Restaurants, exactly. And so I think that's where we have been able to build this huge movement over labeling, because that's where most people come to that sort of phenomenological horizon where they meet their food. But what I love about what Miguel has done, and so many people in this room have done, is that we know we're not going to have a true, vibrant food movement unless we grow to get well below or above that and get back to the basics, to the soil, to that which actually is there. We need to have everybody understand where that food comes from and how critical that is for our individual, collective survival and the survival of the earth itself. So that's our job. It's a huge job from a public relations point of view, from a scientific point of view, is how can we get the food movement to truly embrace that deeper, more profound aspect of our food system and recreate it. It's a big job. It's a big job that we're doing here and we'll all continue to do. In order to sort of take us through that, I want to, no good deed goes unpunished, so in that Miguel asked me to give this talk, I want to actually talk a little bit as a psychologist as well. And I'll be doing individual therapy later for anybody who wants to come. No, I got a degree in it. It just seems like I'm wasting it. And I think we have to see the profound delusional aspects that are behind industrial agriculture. And they are so delusional that it's embarrassing to even have to talk about it. But they are still very powerful delusions. And the first delusion that we have is the delusion, and I would call it a delusion of endless extraction, right? The idea that we can endlessly extract and that that's going to work. It's obviously pathological. I mean, we know in the next 2 generations when the oil's not going to be there, the natural gas isn't going to be there, 2.5 generations, the coal will not be there. And we'll talk a little bit later about soil and water. But we are coming to the end of the age of extraction. And so what that means is, if you're talking about soil, not oil, soil is our future, oil is our past. It's a dead paradigm. It's done. It's finished. It's not like we're going to have that. Oh my God, we're going to be fighting oil for the next 100. No, it's going to be gone. So it's a dead paradigm, oil, and the whole extraction delusion. But it's a zombie paradigm. Maybe that's why we're having all these zombie movies. Because even though it's dead, it's unbelievably destructive. And as a matter of fact, as it becomes more and more difficult to extract oil, we see deep water drilling. As it becomes more difficult to extract coal, we see mountaintop removal. We're seeing what's happening with fracking. We're seeing what's happening with tar sands. That's all happening because of scarcity. So unfortunately, as this paradigm dies, this zombie paradigm, its environmental impacts as it searches for harder and harder to get stuff is going to be greater and greater, which is why we have to stop it sooner and sooner. The other paradigm is what I call the delusion of eradication. You see, the industrial mindset assumed that it could get rid of anything that was inconvenient to it permanently. And that included, of course, the indigenous peoples of the world. For a period of time in this country and around Europe and elsewhere, it also included eugenics, getting rid of the people that didn't look like they were going to be very good commodities, selling themselves in the marketplace. But for our purposes, of course, is primarily their view of what to do with what they call weeds, right? Which are often wonderful plants, and what to do with insects that didn't go along with the monoculture system. And the idea was that we could eradicate them, the fungi. So, you know, if you look at the larger picture, right, you have pesticides. That's the umbrella term most of you know, right? And then under that, you have insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and rodenticides. And it's called pesticides. But are they really pesticides? I mean, we know that the neonics kill bees. Are bees pests? No. We know that many of these kill children, our children. Most people are not pests. There's a few Republicans in Congress. But in general, no. As Rachel Carson said in the second to last page of Silent Spring, and if you've not read it, you must immediately read it, one of my favorite books and my very favorite people, she said that this is Neanderthal biology, right? Because these aren't pesticides, these are biocides. They kill everything. They don't know that something is a pest and something not a pest. They don't say, oh, that's something we don't need, that's a bee, we won't kill that. That's a monarch butterfly, we won't kill that. No, they kill everything. They kill the birds, they kill beneficial insects, they kill humans, they kill mammals. They're biocides. The word pesticides is really a misnomer and a term that they get away with what they shouldn't. But the thing is, and by the way, we had the same view of bacteria, right? You have a bad bacteria in your body, what did you take? Antibiotics, right? That's the delusion of eradication. We can just get rid of them. But what's happened? Yeah, nature bats last. Nature bats last. What we have seen all across the board here is that the bacteria finally become resistant to all known antibiotics. Right now we're at peak herbicides. You know, when Monsanto used so much of its Roundup, it said that the weeds would never adapt to Roundup. They would always be susceptible to it. They said this in Congress. So they would not have passed a second grade biology exam. Of course they were. So now we have, in 50% of American farms, we have weeds that are resistant to Roundup. So they said, you know what we're going to do? There is no other Roundup. There's no other broad spectrum herbicide. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Agent Orange, an element of Agent Orange, and try and use that to see if we can get the plants to tolerate that. Right? Because they're going backwards in a chemical arms race. Now, through litigation, we've been able to stop the entire generation of Agent Orange crops for the time being. Yeah. And Dow Chemical is in some trouble because of that. So they're trying to merge DuPont. And then Monsanto decided, well, we're going to try and then go backwards even further to even a more toxic herbicide, right? That herbicide is called dicamba, which volatilizes and can rise up in a vapor after it's been sprayed and travel miles, and then come down on your apple orchard or your organic farm and destroy it. And because they sold it prematurely, you can Google this up if you haven't already seen it, recently 200,000 acres have been destroyed, mostly soy, by this vapor from one farm over to another. Farmers are suing themselves all around the country. So if Roundup is becoming useless, 2,4-D and Roundup combination is too synergistic and too harmful, and dicamba can't be used, that basically would be the end of 95% of genetic engineering. And that is exactly what we're going to make happen, because we're not going to let them use any of that. But see, in their minds, they still have this thing. So what have we done instead of antibiotics? What are we using? Probiotics. That is the answer. When we talk about regenerative agriculture and agroecology, we are talking about not eradicating, but partnering. Right? And we're talking about no more sort of the age of extraction, right? But the age of regeneration. That is the future. They're the dead past. And we've got to do everything in our damn power to make sure that that zombie dies. But we know what's in his place. We know where we're going. We know what we have to do. Now, let's go through this a little bit, because sometimes people say to me, not this crowd, but we'll go through it anyway. People say, you know, Andy, it all sounds nice, but it's kind of airy-fairy. We have to feed the... Yeah, exactly. As if they were, by the way. You see, we have massive starvation in this country, right? What happened? So let's go through it. Let's see when industrial agriculture is really done. Because the major difference between soil and oil is that one is alive and the other is dead. As a matter of fact, soil is so alive, and you all know this, that 1 teaspoon or 1 gram of soil is how many bacteria? 1 billion, that's right. And we're not even talking about the protozoa, and we're not talking about the nematodes, the worms, all that other life that's in there, right? It is the most lively thing you could possibly imagine. Oil is dead. But what else do we need? If we're going to have a plant that's going to grow, we don't just need soil. What else do we need? Yeah, fertilizer is a really good point. I'm going to come to, well, actually, I'll do it now. So fertilizer, so here's my big complaint about the soil movement so far. And by the way, I have to say thank you to Diana Donlan and my wonderful soil team in San Francisco and in DC. I am a little jealous of them. Not that I don't love Richmond, and I really do love Richmond and what's happened in this city and so many beautiful things. But they got to go to Paris in December. I couldn't go because other work to do. And we were invited, which is a real privilege, to be part of the Conference of Parties 21. And we continue to work with the French government on this. So Diana and her team have just, if you haven't checked out her videos and the CFS soil team, please do that. They're not just working here in California, they're working around the country. But one of my complaints is that we should have the campaign against fertilizer. What a catastrophe. I know we all want to be positive and proactive, but forgive the lawyer in me, the case against fertilizer is horrifying. Not only does it produce nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more potent than CO2, right? Talk about climate change. But does anybody know about dead zones? The one in the Gulf of Mexico, which is now the size of Connecticut. And think of all the water systems in the entire Midwest. We're spending 80, 90, $100 million every year to try and filter this out from the systems, water systems, and often have to close it down, knowing that it causes cancer, knowing that it has enormous impacts on infants. That's a panacea technology that's a catastrophe, absolute catastrophe. Now, to grow a plant in a sustainable, grow a plant, we need soil. What else do we need? Water. What else? Seed. Sun. Like many people in this room, we need farmers. What about the neonicotinoids? Bees. And in many areas, it helps the pollinators, exactly. And in other areas, we need animals. So let's just take a look at those essentials for a minute. There's others, but let's just take, I'll call those the 7 essentials. And let's take a look, how well is industrial agriculture doing? Because it says it's the future. We say we're the future. Let's see who's the future. How is industrial agriculture doing with soil? It's catastrophic, right? It takes 1,000 years to replace 3 centimeters of topsoil, right? We have exhausted 1/3 of the world's topsoil, and it's working, we're actually despoiling it at an exponential rate. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations said that in 60 years we will not be able to do farming as we currently know it. We agree, right? And by 2050, we will have 1/4 of the arable land that the world had in 1950. Let me repeat that. This is the Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN. In 2050, we'll have 1/4 of the arable land that we had in 1950 because of desertification. So how did industrial agriculture doing with that essential? Disastrous. Can't happen. It's a dead paradigm. What about water? Better? Water, definitely not better. Here in California, we know that. What's happened to my beloved Colorado River? Killing it. Destroying it, right? A lot of that has to do with the meat industry, has to do with alfalfa, has to do with some of our almond growers here. But think about the Ogallala, help me with this, right? Aquifer, thank you. That stretches from South Dakota to Texas, that's right. And they say by 2050, it will be 60% depleted. By the way, we have 34 aquifer systems in the United States. All of them are in similar shape. And it will take 1,500 years to replace that water. So, not so good there either. So when we talk about regenerative agriculture, it's not some kind of vague, tree-huggy thing. It's based in the most profound ecological principles. The fact is, we will not be able to survive here as a human species unless we have an agriculture that completely respects the regenerative rhythms of the basics that we need. We are not going to have farming that doesn't respect the regenerative needs of soil. Now, we can help, we can bioremediate, we can help that soil. We're going to have to respect it. We're going to have to learn from it, because we don't even know almost anything about that 1 billion bacteria, much less the rest. We're just learning. We have to be humble and say we need to respect what that does. Same with water. We need water regenerates at its own pace. All right? What about seed? Yeah, we've monocultured the seed. We've lost about 90% of our seed, vegetable and fruit seeds, in the last 70 years. And here's something that really disturbs me. You know, if you think of the corn seed, Miguel and I were talking about this, you know, the sort of the sacred nature of the corn seed. And you think what's happened to the corn seed in the last 70 years, right? First thing they did was they did basically the first Terminator technology in the 1930s, which is they created a hybridized corn that would not grow in another season, so the farmers had to go back and buy that seed. So they stopped. For the very first time in history, they did not breed seeds to have more fortitude, to be able to survive better in an environment, to have sort of land races that helped feed people. For the very first time, we purposely bred a seed to basically die after one season, right? Then we decided, oh, well, we're going to actually have seeds that have thicker stalks, so you have to use mechanization. So more and more farmers went out of business because they couldn't afford seeds every year, couldn't afford the mechanization. Then we had monocultures, but then what happened? All the insects came into the monocultures, right? So sooner or later, we had to have seeds that were like soaked in atrazine. And now we have corn seeds that are not only soaked in atrazine, but they're genetically engineered so that the plant can withstand huge amounts of Roundup. And inside those seeds is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a non-chemical pesticide. And we now coat those seeds with neonicotinoid pesticides, like a little M&M, and fungicides. Think about that, in less than 80 years. Right now, and this is not me, this is a scientific study, said that if a songbird were to eat just one corn seed, it would kill it. So we turned the symbol of life, like oil, into something that's dead. So we're talking about saving our seeds, and all the great people out there that are doing the amazing work on seed saving. Our group is doing it. We're for the very first time putting together the first ever international seed savers exchange, so we can get a non-corporate way of people to have seeds and exchange seeds around the world, which we're going to need in a climate change world. Now, what about farms and farm communities? We've lost 10 million farmers in my lifetime, 5 million farms. And among professions, which we always, I mean, Vandana talks a lot about this in India, but we sometimes forget about America. What profession has the highest suicide rate in America? Dentist is number 3. And I've never understood why. I can see why they would be the most murdered profession in America. I've never understood why they would be the most commit suicide. Maybe their fear, actually. No. Farmers number 1. Lately, you may have read in the front page of the New York Times, we've had a 21% increase, especially among whites, because of the depression and suicide, from 16 to 21 per 100,000. But among farmers, it's 85. The equivalent would be 85 of 100,000. So when I wrote and edited the book Fatal Harvest, I was not being hyperbolic when you look at this particular paradigm. And if anybody's driven through Iowa or some of the states to look ghost town after ghost town, there's no culture, you know, it's all agribusiness, right? 53% of Americans' farmland is planted in corn and soy. By the way, 50% of the fertilizer in America is used, of the 43 billion pounds we use every year, is used on corn. But 53% of all of our farmland is used on corn and soy. How many people does that directly feed? Just about none, that's right. About 35, 40% of corn goes into cars. The rest goes into these horrifying animal factories. And the rest goes into high fructose corn syrup. Same with soy. Most of it goes into these chicken farms, goes into cars, goes into soy lecithin, and other byproducts used for... So about 3 or 4% of each actually directly feeds Anybody. And yet we say we have the highest yielding agriculture in the world. I think it's about time we said, you know, we're going to judge agriculture from now on by the seeds that you're planting that create nutrition per acre, not yield per acre. We don't care about yield per acre. We care about nutrition per acre. We need to start that like yesterday, right? Now we know the miracle of photosynthesis, right? I mean, talk about alchemy. Oh my Lord. Carbon, sugar, what it does to the whole plant, it's unbelievable. But what temperature do you think photosynthesis stops working for most plants? It's about 100 degrees, somewhere 100, 104. So the sun, instead of being a friend with climate change, could become an enemy. Right? We've created a situation where unless we do what everyone here is fighting hard to stop, we can stop photosynthesis. I mean, we can't change that. We know about the pollinators. We currently have, I think, 4 different litigations and a huge network, which many groups here are part of, the Pollinator Protection Network of international groups. Tremendous. We took a poll, and 84% of Americans are now aware that pollinators, and particularly bees, are under threat, and that pesticides are the problem. So it's done a tremendous job by all those working on the bee. We know what's happening in Europe, and I'm hoping very, very soon we will be able to get that moratorium on all these pesticides here. But we know what's happening to the pollinators. And the animals is really one of the most tragic things for me. The 10 billion animals every year that are tortured in our industrial food system, right? It's one of the great crimes of modernity, what's happening to these animals every day. And even the wonderful advantage they have through what some people call rotational grazing. I like to call it relational farming, not rotational farming, because it's everything in relationship to everything else. So that, of course, leads to these huge lagoons. And we all know that emits, again, many times more potent than CO2. So my friends, that is the picture of industrial agriculture. What do you think? I mean, if you were running against industrial agriculture in an election, it'd be easier than running against Donald Trump. I mean, this is a disaster, right? So when people say, you know, what are you talking about with sustainable, or what are you talking about regenerative? And I do think we need to work on some names. I think the term agroecology may seem a little too academic. It's a great science. Many people devoted many years to it, but it sounds a little like a course taught at Berkeley. Maybe because it is a course taught at Berkeley. I love Miguel Altuve. Don't tell him I said that. Permaculture bothers me because I had a grandmother who always used to get a permanent. And it reminds me of a hair salon. So I like regenerative. But I think if we look at this horrifying zombie that's causing so much destruction, not just to humans and our food system, but think of all the microbes, think of all the animals being tortured, think of all the animals in the wild, think of all the rivers and the streams and the dead zones. If you think of that legacy of industrial agriculture, it's over here. In the middle, we have something I've fought for 30 years, which is organic. We have a very strong vision of organic, which is to defend the standards like hell, and they need defending right now, and to evolve the ethic. And by evolving that ethic, defend the standards, evolve the ethic, that's our rule on organic. We want to go beyond that. What does beyond organic mean? It means organic and beyond. That means local. That means appropriate scale. That means biodiverse. That means humane. And that means socially just. Local, appropriate scale, humane, biodiverse, socially just. And through that, we hope to get to these agroecological regenerative principles that will be where we need to go. And we're still working on that. And this room is working on that. We're going to be part of a major conference in 2017 to try and get some of the basic, it's not going to be one size fits all, but there'll be principles. And we have to learn that our agriculture has to be a wholly owned subsidiary of ecology, or we're not going to make it. Simple as that. Now, there's one other paradigm I want to go over. And I have to go over this because Miguel is here, which is this situation we have with not only the delusion of eradication, and of course the delusion of endless extraction, but we also have the delusion that the market solves all. All right? Get this all the time. And again, this is pathological. So for example, let's assume the world population grows and needs more and more tuna. Tuna have not read Adam Smith. They do not know the law of supply and demand. They just missed that class. Right? As a matter of fact, nothing in nature, zero in nature, actually reproduces according to human supply and demand needs. So we built up the entire market system, totally alienated from all of nature. So it isn't just our agriculture that's going to have to be a wholly owned subsidiary of ecology. It's going to have to be our society and our economics. And let me finish with a word that I think is really important as we build this new paradigm together. And that is that most times we are referred to as consumers. Right? Consumers. We've sometimes even called the consumer movement. Right? But you know what they used to call tuberculosis? Consumption. That's right. Because it ate up the body. Now, can you imagine a fire? Fire consumes a house. Fire consumes. So we don't want to be consumers. Right? Mere consumers. That's what they want us to be in the industrial model. And not just food. They want us to consume music, consume TV, consume, instead of writing music, writing poetry. And, of course, growing our own food. So we're not consumers. Nobody in this room is a consumer. We're creators. Everything we grow, the food that we buy, the hard battles that we fight, not always being successful, but sometimes, but always being faithful, to a new food future, to a regenerative food future, because we know that together we will I want to be careful here. I'm not always every decision making is not always towards that. But for the most part, we at least know that's our responsibility. Together, and everything we do together as comrades is to create that new future. We are creators. We're not consumers. And I hope we'll never be consumers again. And I am grateful to each and every one of you for helping all of us create a new food future. Thank you.
I was going to say that very few times we have an opportunity to have somebody with such knowledge that he can answer a lot of questions that we have, you know. So we're going to have a few questions, maybe 3 or 4 questions from the public. I don't know who would be interested in, who has any question for Andrew Kimbrell? Okay. Do we have the other microphones? No, only this? That one with the cable? Okay.
We can repeat the question if you hear it, yeah.
Well, I didn't say it yet, so.
When we hear it. Yeah. The answer is no,
Okay.
But thank you for asking. We appreciate your comment.
It's not happening yet. There we go. So I just wonder if you're involved at all in the lawsuit that's going on in Europe against Monsanto. Is that anything that you're involved with, or what do you know about that?
I'm not involved in that lawsuit. Which one are you on glyphosate, or which one are you talking about?
I think so, yeah. That's the one.
Yeah, well, maybe what you're referring to, and if not, it's very important what they're doing with Monsanto, which is that Monsanto tried to re-register glyphosate Roundup for 18 years and then 15 years in Europe. And because of massive uprising in the streets, they reduced that to 18 months. And even that 18 months is not sure until they get the science. So remember, about 90% of all genetic engineering is there because it tolerates massive doses of herbicides. If we get rid of this horrifying application of this technology, it would basically mean the end of that technology. So if we can get rid of Roundup, make sure 2,4-D never sees the light of day, make sure dicamba never sees the lights of day, that's the end of the chemical companies. They were never in this to feed people, folks, because it doesn't add any yield. They were there because it sells more chemicals. Once they can't sell any more chemicals, they're done, and the technology's done.
Would like to thank the volunteers who were cooking for you today. Everything at the registration table. I want to thank everyone because I can see maybe half of the people here I have been working with, and also maybe 25% of the people who is here has made this conference possible. We need a lot of people to put together this kind of gathering. We need a lot of people. And Fertilizer has been very supportive with us. In the past, we used to organize the Young together with Steve, that Andre Kimbrell also joined us before the past year. And in Seattle, this was part of the state committee, was very important part of this. So, thank you, Theo. And you are here again. And, you know, with Vital Systems, that was their project, it was restoring our soils and ecosystems and for many years. And she has a question for you.
I do have a question for you. So in her latest Berkeley visit, Vandana Shiva mentioned that there was going to be a people's tribunal against Monsanto, one, if I'm not mistaken, in The Hague, and she was encouraging that everybody around the world should do kind of sympathetic or resonative world courts against Monsanto sometime in October. What do you know about this?
Yeah, there's one in India that took place, and lawyers from my organization and others went there and pressed our case. I think that we sort of won that, and it's in The Hague. One thing I would caution us about, and I mean, I've sued Monsanto for the last 30 years of my life, but it's not just Monsanto. Dow is just as bad. DuPont, Bayer, Syngenta, BASF, and that's really important because soon they're not going to have those names. They're all merging, right? So it's going to be Dow, DuPont. They're probably going to call themselves Eco-Green. Bayer, and I'm predicting here, not making news, but just predicting that Bayer will take over Monsanto. They're going to move to London because Monsanto says it doesn't want to pay any more U.S. taxes. And that'll probably be called Field Good Corporation. I'm just making this stuff up. I don't know what you're saying. And of course, Syngenta is being taken over by ChemChina. So I don't know what that'll be called because I don't know Chinese. But so we're going to have to be careful. These, you know, Monsanto is a wonderful, you know, and well deserves, you know, but we have to be careful to see this entire industry, this entire pathology of eradication, which they make their livings on, killing things with their biocides. We have to say they're all the enemy, and we need to fight every one of them just as hard as we've fought Monsanto.
There's steps of progress, so we need to fight the old and build the new, and so we've gotten a lot of encouragement to build here. Really admire your work over the years, and there was a book just came out lately about invasive species, about how we need to change the paradigm of those. And so there's a massive amount of pesticides that are sprayed for, you know, in an ecological perspective, for, you know, incredibly stupid, self-destructive ends and so on. And so I'm wondering if you have some thoughts as far as, you know, throwing some monkey wrench in the work. Currently, you know, we're pushing back against the Asian citrus psyllid here in California. And so they're using broad-spectrum pesticides to control this insect that carries a disease that makes a tree sick. And then from the perspective of organic farming, we know that a healthy plant resists pests and disease. And so the whole premise of spraying, you know, a pesticide to improve things is not the issue. The issue is growing healthy food. So anyway, I wonder if you have some...
Well, that was a great question and a great answer. I agree with everything you just said. I can throw some fancy words on it just because I like to, which is that what we see as the industrial agriculture paradigm through its monocultures brings in these pests. We see what I would call panacea technologies. And these don't really work, but they're out there so that the New York Times, mainstream media, Science Journal can convince you that the industrial paradigm isn't all that bad, that somehow it's going to be able to solve its own issues. So certainly genetic engineering is in that, right? I mean, for the last 30 years, you've heard genetic engineering will mean we'll use less pesticide. We will feed the world more nutrition. And that was complete nonsense. It was chemical companies trying to sell more chemicals. And they did. You got to give them credit. A lot more. In Monsanto's case, 115 million more pounds, except they were kind of wrong about the Darwin thing. And now we have the resistance thing. So these are panacea technologies, and they often are addressing real problems. But the idea is to try and come with a stopgap solution, more poisons, more toxins, more eradication, which is exactly the way we got in this problem to begin with. And one of the beautiful things about soil is that among those bacteria, you know, we know the clavibacter that fixate nitrogen, and how amazing those bacteria are. We don't know. We know a little about that. We also know a little about the Pseudomonas bacteria that are really great at clearing out fungi, clearing out harmful things on the microbiome of the roots. And we know there's these natural systems that if we encourage them, just as you were saying, that they're really the answer. The pathology of eradication, nature always bats last. It's just not debatable. It always does, and these panacea technologies try and deny that. One quick thing I didn't mention before, by the way, and I think it's a job for all of us here. When I talk about climate change, and you know, as you may know, my organization, myself, we filed a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court, and we were able to win 5-4 by one narrow vote. The fact that climate change exists and EPA has to regulate it, so that was a very good victory a few years ago. But whenever I talk about climate change, because people ask me because of that Supreme Court case that we litigated, they know about what causes climate change, especially CO2, and they even know there should be renewables. But what they don't know, which would sort of at least stop it from increasing at an incredible rate, but as everyone has said here, what people out there don't know is that these two amazing technologies that can actually help address and actually reduce it significantly. And I always call it two technologies because in our technophilic world, if you say two technologies, people immediately pay attention. And then I tell them those two technologies are soil and trees. And there's a little bit of a disappointment, but they keep listening usually. And that is the third stool of the, right? That's the third leg, sorry, of the stool, right? The first is stop doing the bad stuff, substitute renewables, but that third leg of really that biosequestration, that has not gotten out to the general public yet. That is not, I mean, because people are looking for hope, people are looking for empowerment, because it seems to them this issue just has, there's no way we're ever going to solve them. If they know that there is a solution, and that they can help with that solution to their practices in their gardens, in their farms, and in their communities, and in their forests, that they can be doing something. We're going to double the canopy here. We're going to bioremediate this soil. If they know that, not only are these solutions something they can understand, but they're incredibly beautiful, right? So that's our job. We've got to get that message out in a much bigger way than we have. I mean, we're all busy as heck and doing everything we can, but that hope is something that I have not yet seen in the media very much, and that is something that we need to get out there. And if we do that, I think we're going to see a much larger understanding of the vital aspect that soil and tree canopies have for our future. Yeah, anytime corporations say something like smart, you know that the opposite is the truth. It's always... Exactly, smart growth is a good choice. But let me just quickly, I don't know how much time Miguel wants to have here, but let me
we can have another question?
Okay, I just got this. This is just too funny or too terrible. I obviously have a bizarre sense of humor. So the Grocery Manufacturers Association that just fought us for a year, and we beat them in March. We lost because, unfortunately, the Organic Trade Association went against us. But on the thing, the reason that bill got passed, I'm talking about the DARK Act, is because the Grocery Manufacturers Association created a program called Smart Label. You can look it up. Don't Google it up right now, please. But you can Google it up as soon as we're done here. And the Smart Label idea is really brilliant. Their idea is to take all labeling on food right now, nutrition, vitamins, calories, and put them all into QR codes. Nothing on the label, so that means they can use the rest of the packaging to say how great their product is. Really smart for them, really dumb for us or anybody else, because you can have it's all going to be hidden in that QR code. So the reason they were so desperate to pass the DARK Act was the first example where they could say we're going to put labeling inside a QR code, which is what the smart code, the smart label hope is. So it's not just about GMOs. This is the beginning of what they hope is a revolution in smart labeling, where you won't be able to see all the stuff you can see now. It'll be hidden into a QR code. And again, let me remind you that 100 million Americans do not even have smartphones, and many more are in areas where there's no Wi-Fi. But even then, can you imagine the burden? They've switched the burden from them onto the customer, because you're going to have to put your phone in front of every product to find out what the calories are, and no one's going to do that, and they know that. But they'll say, don't worry, we'll also have an 800 number. Which means you can also call an 800 number. So talk about smart label, it's the dumbest idea in the world. Same is true with climate smart, right? What they mean by climate smart is Monsanto smart, right? They say you can have these computer things that can tell you just how much pesticide you can use, just how much, to help yield. Help yield what? Corn and soy, which take 53% of our thing. So they want more yield, we'll have less nutrition. And we recently learned in a science study that they're even creating a heat dome over some of this GE corn because they're exhausting the soil in such a rate that there's less moisture and it's actually creating more heat. So I don't think it's very climate smart. Monsanto saying anything except we want to make money is not believable in any case.
This is the
What is life after the DARK Act?
What is life after the DARK Act? Well,
I mean, because, we worked so hard on that for years, and here we are, and they said, have a good day. I don't think so.
It's a shame.
Well, there's poetry, there's music, if you're lucky enough, wonderful lovemaking. Yeah, but I think you meant it in a more narrow sense. Well, first of all, we're going to sue their asses, and what most people don't know about the DARK Act is it didn't just erase the Vermont labeling law, but it also erased the labeling laws of GMO labeling laws of Maine and Connecticut. It also erased the GMO fish labeling law of Alaska. Alaska had passed a bill many years ago, unanimous in the Senate of Alaska, saying we want to protect our salmon and other fish from GE fish, and so they have to label here. And it also erased 2 seed labeling laws in Virginia and Vermont. Most people aren't aware of that. In those 2 states, and many other states have similar laws, you have to actually label if your seed has GMO in it to give farmers a choice. So we're going to have farmers, we're going to have consumers, we're going to have groups that represent, we're going to have civil rights groups, we're going to have elderly groups, we're going to have all those that have been discriminated against, because they are basically saying this digital divide now is something we can use, everybody on the wrong side of that digital divide, whether it be the poor, low income, predominantly minority, they have no rights. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to be able to know what's in their food. And we think that's an absolutely gross violation of the 14th Amendment. And they're also saying to companies, any companies here, they're saying, you're not going to be able to say truthfully what's in your product. They are saying to many companies, you cannot put non-GMO on your product, even though it's been proven to be non-GMO. And so that actually is a First Amendment violation. So this bill is a train wreck. It was written very, very quickly after a few people went along with it. So we will litigate it. And we're also going to do market campaigns, a lot of us. And by the way, when I say us, it's not just Center for Food Safety. It's a number of other, literally 150 or 200 other groups that have been, this is this tremendous food movement we're building here. It's one of the best things about this. And that army now we're going to use in many other areas, forgive the military metaphor. But I think it would be kind of interesting, I haven't decided on this, but I thought it might be kind of interesting to say, if it has a QR code on it, don't buy it. You know, I mean, first of all, if it has a QR code on it, it means it is ab initio, forgive the legal term, from the beginning, discriminatory. Because 100 million Americans can't even read that. So you shouldn't have information on your package that people can't read in rural areas. You can't have that. And the second of all, it probably means it's GMO, right? So my view is just say no to QR codes, and so that means that they made the biggest mistake, that they're the dumbest guys in the room. Why are they the dumbest guys in the room? Because they were trying to sell QR codes as the future of labeling in their big scheme of forcing it onto consumers and off packages, right? But guess what they just did? They just associated QR codes with rank discrimination and Monsanto and GMOs. Well, if I was their public relations person trying to sell QR codes, I would say, you guys are the dumbest guys in the room, because they'll just say no to QR codes. So those are my two Life After the Dark acts.
I was active in the Label GMO campaign here in California, and we lost the battle in that we didn't get a label, you know, on the label on the food here in California. But I think we won the war. That we raised awareness that there's something wrong with the food, and so there's a consumer rejection of GMOs. And Campbell's is labeling their soup. I wouldn't eat it anyway, but and General Mills, you know, their Cheerios and stuff. So it seems like the consumer rejection, as Jeffrey Smith has advocated all along, is it should be our strategy, is cascading now. And so much as I would like to have a label on the food, how relevant is it in context of the consumer rejection?
Yeah, the problem, I mean, you get most consumer rejection when it's labeled, of course, but if they make QR codes the equivalent of a label, no problem. And by the way, for people that want to use it, all they can say is, gosh, you guys really made a really terrible mistake. I want to say we do have to be careful, though, with non-GMO, and God knows, I've been fighting this for 30 years, the GMO, and the idea of changing the very biology of plants so that they can withstand more biocides is so repulsive that you can't not fight against it. But remember, if we were to get rid of all GMOs tomorrow, remember that corn seed I talked about? All that atrazine would still be there. Huge endocrine disruptor, major, major problem. All those neonics would still be there, killing all the bees. All the fungicides would be there. So we have to be careful. Non-GMO is really important, and it certainly is a massive expansion of the use of these biocides. But the real answer has to be organic and beyond into regenerative agriculture. That's where we really have to go. So we'll still fight them like crazy, but let's always keep our eye, you know, we reject that as never going to be part of regenerative. So we need to reject it. We need to get rid of that zombie paradigm. But let's not let I get off that ball, though, of the future that we all want to build for ourselves, our communities, and the rest of the biotic community of the earth. Good?
Thank you, Andre. I want to remind you that we have been live streaming these videos, or these presentations, I'm sorry, and we have thousands of people already that haven't seen these videos today in YouTube, in the website, in our Facebook page, Not All Coalition, Biosafety Alliance. So if you can share it tomorrow, it will be great. So more people can listen to our speakers. And actually tomorrow is going to be more about the global context of this struggle. Please join us tomorrow. If you have a ticket only for Friday, please feel free to come tomorrow. Don't worry. This is a conference from the people for the people. You know, we are not thinking in profit or something like that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you tomorrow.